I remember getting on to Twitter in the fairly early days. It wasn't right in the beginning, but it was still before, let me think. Smartphones were out, but maybe by only a year. This would have been like 2008-ish time frame. I was getting onto Twitter because at the time I was doing a podcast, and at least for that type of podcast, at that time, the world was on Twitter, right? So if you wanted to get your podcast out there and connect with other people in that community, you needed to be on Twitter. So I did. I had never really gotten into Facebook, but there was something about Twitter that kind of worked for me. I liked that it was these kind of short, digestible posts. And back in the day, I hate saying that, but back then, the prompt on your Twitter box, I'm trying to remember exactly what it said, but it was something along the lines of what's on your mind or something like that. So the whole thing had been set up to be short, digestible, and not necessarily consequential things, right? It was very normal on Twitter to just post some fleeting thought because you didn't need to make a whole post out of it like one might do on LinkedIn. It wasn't really going to live in perpetuity the same way that Facebook did. Like, yes, if someone dug back through your feed, they could find your posts and whatever. But people didn't really do that the same way that, like, the old Facebook wall was kind of almost a sense of permanence. So anyway, there was a lot of things about it. It was also light. The color scheme was like kind of bright blue. The whole thing was very friendly and nice and kind of fun. The other thing that was neat about it, and again, in those early days, like, I probably only had like 10 friends on Twitter or whatever, 10 followers, or followed 10 or 20 people. You know, it grew over time, obviously, but like in the very early days, there wasn't much going on there. And it was very much the dynamic of you could come onto Twitter every, I don't know, couple times a day, maybe at the most, and things were ordered sequentially, right? So the newest stuff would be at the top, and you could scroll kind of down the page, and you could scroll as a combination of the volume of posts, which was fairly low, and the fact that it was sequential. You could scroll your way until you hit wherever you remember leaving off last time, and then you could be finished with it. And you'd kind of feel like, you know what, I'm caught up with the goings on from whatever silly thoughts entered the heads of my like 10 or 20 followers, and you move on with life, right? Maybe there's some conversation to be had, but generally speaking, quote unquote, catching up was very easy. As the volume on these platforms got higher, the volume of posts and people and thoughts and everything, and I'm trying to remember, I think Facebook started this and then every other platform jumped on. But a few years in, and I don't know, I'm going to say it was 2010, 2011. I didn't look up when this began. But social media shifted from a sequential timeline that just shows you new stuff on top and you scroll till you hit the old stuff, over to this algorithmic based thing. Where now there's an algorithm, we call it an algorithm, it's probably like a long series of many, many things and data components, and, you know, there's probably just enormous server farms figuring out what to show you next. But the point is, the quote-unquote algorithm shows you what it believes you should be seeing at any given moment. And that is through presumably a combination of what's been engaged with a lot and what your friends are liking and what you viewed before, and you know, it's gotten more and more complicated over the years, but there is some amount of thinking and work that now goes into deciding what you should see compared to, and you know, juxtaposed with a timeline. And as I recall, and I'm not 100% sure if this is a real thing or if I just made this up in my head. So, but as I recall, again, I seem to remember Facebook kind of doing this first, moving to this sort of thing. And part of their justification was, well, people have so many friends and there's so many posts that we're going to use the algorithm to help focus and narrow, right? They almost positioned it altruistically, where it's like, hey, you can't see it all because it takes too long, so we're going to show you the good stuff. That was kind of the idea. Now, I am often in this tight spot because I am a technologist. I always have been. I've always been drawn to computers and the internet and the web and, technology that progresses and reduces friction in life and does interesting things. And, I might not be much of a physical engineer, but in terms of technology as a whole, that's always been a part of my interests, my hobbies, my profession, me. And I'm always caught between sort of that part of me that is super interested in the progression of technology and the other part of me that realizes increasingly many of these technological advances, quote unquote, or changes, or whatever you want to call them, are not going in a great direction. And kind of feeling almost part of the problem while also being curious to see where it goes. I bring this up because I wasn't a huge Facebook user or anything. Eventually this type of algorithm-based feed came to Twitter as well while I was, still on that. These days it's ubiquitous. It's Reddit, it's LinkedIn, I don't know. And I've heard tale that some of these platforms there is like a view somewhere hidden where you can look at things sequentially, but generally speaking, most people are not viewing any of their social media in a sequential manner. They're viewing it based on what the company believes you either want to see or should see or whatever. And I wasn't a detractor on this. When Facebook moved to this, A, I wasn't really on Facebook and didn't care. But B, the technologist in me saw this as the next step and was curious how it would go. In hindsight, the only people, quote unquote, that benefit from this are the platforms. The sequential feed, as I mentioned, was easy to get in and out of. You could hop on, catch up, feel like you knew what was going on in the world and life, and move on. That's not a great flow for a social media platform that's primarily trying to take your attention and give it to advertisers, or take your attention and give it to whatever. Again, mostly advertising. But the point is, it needs your attention to survive. It used to be that we opted our attention into these things because of the social connections on the other side, and that coin or that lever flipped along the way somewhere, where the platforms took control of our attention in a very real way through psychological tricks and techniques where it has addicted people to it over time. And the social components to it are almost secondary. I mean, sure, there's likes and some conversations and whatever, but a lot of it these days is literally just doom scrolling, right? Just keeping your attention on it. And if you had a timeline on a platform that was sequential, and it would not lend itself to doom scrolling in the same way. And that's very much a well-known fact on the part of these platforms. What got me thinking about all of this is loss of time. Loss of the concept of time. And it sort of manifests itself in at least two ways as part of this conversation. There is the obvious way where we all know that if you are someone who engages in really any social platform, odds are you have, at some point or another, spent way too long just scrolling through a bunch of meaningless garbage, right? You've just gone down that doom scroll. It's a lot easier to do that than face whatever else it is in life that you probably should or could be doing, or you're bored, or you just lose track of time or whatever, right? So you lose time in that way. And it's a very literal kind of thing. But I think there's another way that we're beginning to lose time. And I'm gonna pick on LinkedIn a little bit on this one, because it's just most obvious, I think, on LinkedIn. Well, I mean, it's a couple things, right? I for the very little bit of social media that I bother to use, LinkedIn's about it these days. So I'm just a little more familiar there. But also, this piece is kind of called out on LinkedIn, and I think it exemplifies the point. I think there's another way that we're beginning to lose time societally. Again, if you reverse back to the sequential feed, it's very clear when something happened. Because if you were on the thing yesterday, let's say you were on Twitter yesterday, and then you come in today and you scroll down through 20 posts, you're pretty sure those 20 posts happened sometime between when you logged off yesterday and today. With the algorithm-based feeds, you will get content from all sorts of time periods. And a lot of these aren't even bothering to label anymore. Like it used to be, you'd come in, it would say like recent or something as a heading. You don't really even see that anymore. You're just getting like this mashup of stuff that could have occurred at any point in time. Now, I'm picking on LinkedIn a little bit. I'll pick on LinkedIn a little bit on this because on their posts, and I just haven't been on like Twitter in a long time or Facebook or anything. So I don't know if this is also a thing over there. It might be, but it tells you, when it was posted on LinkedIn still pretty obviously, like at the top, and it gives you kind of a broad time frame. And I'll look at that sometimes, and I'll give you an example of what I mean here by like we're losing time. I'll see a post on LinkedIn from someone. It's like, oh, had this great time at this conference. Really happy to meet some people. And I'm like, oh, wow, this person's at a conference. That's really cool. Or just came back from a conference. And I'll look at the heading. It'll be like 3 weeks ago. Like it will have been posted 3 weeks ago. And this will have been the first time that I have any recollection of seeing this particular thing, which means that LinkedIn somewhere along the way decided that I should see this post from 3 weeks ago. The problem is, or not the problem, but the observation that I made was, I feel like I'm losing connection with when things are occurring because I might not get that information for several weeks afterwards. Whereas had it been sequential, I would have had a better concept. Now, someone or an acquaintance going to a conference, not the end of the world, right? Like whatever, who cares? Like you don't see that for 3 weeks. It probably makes literally no difference in your life. But is this a good path overall? And do people start to lose touch with the actual sequential reality that we live in? If a good portion of what you consume could come from any point in time, even though you're only looking at it for the first time, and it could be mixed in with things from 5 minutes ago and things from 2 weeks ago and things from yesterday and things from, and an advertisement. And when you start mashing all that together and you lose the sense of time, are we headed in a direction where we continue to disconnect from our actual reality because we don't any longer have a sense of when things are occurring unless you really bother to look for it? I don't know. It got me thinking because there's a lot of conversation around how we lose time in a very literal way because you lose time by doom scrolling through social media. Fine. That's very obvious. But I think there's this other layer, which is this layer of we're no longer experiencing the world in a sequential order, and therefore we are losing touch with how things have been sequenced and when they occurred, and sometimes where. So I don't know. Next time you're scrolling through, and again, I don't spend tons of time on a lot of these platforms, but take a look. Is it obvious when something was posted? Do you pay much attention to it? When you see something, does it matter to you that it was from 3 weeks ago? Maybe it doesn't. But it seems to me if I was being shown it almost feels like brainwashing, right? If I was being shown a slideshow and it's like someone showed me something from 5 minutes ago, 6 minutes ago, 7 minutes ago, 8 minutes ago, and then every now and then just interwove in something from several weeks ago, I feel like it would be very easy to manipulate that in some way, where you feel like things are occurring when they haven't, or at a time when they haven't, or at a different time than they did.